We've been exploring the inner and the outer and connectivity. So let's dive a little deeper. First, there's that old story about that day when Mola Nasruddin came back from the coffee shop after a hard day of nattering with his friends. And he came in the door and said to his wife, "Wife, go and feed the donkey." And she was happening to stir the rice peel up, and she said, "Go and do it yourself. I've been washing and cleaning all day, and now I'm stirring the rice. Go feed the donkey yourself." And they got into a very heated argument about this until finally the mullah said, "Well, let's make a bargain. Whoever speaks first will go and feed the donkey." So after a while, of course, the mullah's wife, not used to living in silence, decided that she'd go over and visit her neighbours and leave the mullah to it. So off she went to the neighbour's house, leaving the mullah sitting on his chair in the lounge room when all of a sudden a group of robbers came by. And they came into the house looking around and had quite a start when they saw the mullah sitting there, but he was totally unmoving. He didn't blink an eye when they came in. So they went about their business of stripping the house. They took everything, all the artifacts and the furniture and everything. And when they saw the mullah still sitting there and not making a movement as a last laugh, they took his turban off his head and then they left. So after a while, the mullah's wife felt a bit sorry for him, so she sent the neighbour's son over with a bowl of soup for him. And when the young boy came into the lounge room where the mullah was sitting, the mullah with his lips tightly, firmly shut, indicated to the young boy by gesticulating around the house, "Look, they took everything." And the boy, wondering what he was talking about, circled around the room. And then the mullah pointed to his head, "And look, they even took my turban." So which the young boy misinterpreted, so he went over and poured the bowl of soup on the mullah's head. And so the little boy went back to his neighbour's house and recounted this to his neighbours, and the mullah's wife, well, of course the mullah's wife was incensed, and she went straight back to her house and she abused the mullah. How could you oh, you know, you can imagine what was said between them. So after the wife's tirade, the mullah stood up to his full height and he said, "You see what your stubbornness has done? And you spoke first, so go and feed the donkey." Then there's a little story about a monk who was walking down the road when he came to a little village in the main street of the village. But just as he was entering the main street, he saw that there was a couple there having a very, very heated argument, and the wife shouting at the husband, "You're not a man!" And the husband replying, "You say that one more time and I'm going to hit you." And so the argument goes on, and the monk stands by and he starts to call out to her, "Oh, come watch this. This is better than a cockfight. You'd have to pay if you watched a cockfight. Come and watch these two having a good old barney." And so one of the passers-by said to them, how can you say that? You're a monk." And with that, the wife says, "You see, you're not a man. I'll say it again and again." And the husband said, "You say that one more time and I'll kill you." And the monk says, well, you see, they're going to kill themselves now. Listen, I can make some money out of this because I'll be able to attend the funeral. And so the passerby standing there said, "You're a monk. How can you say those kind of things?" And the monk said, "Yes, but if they stop arguing, I could teach them that when you have a husband and wife come together in harmony, it's like bringing together the yin and the yang, or the positive and the negative, I could begin to teach them the Dharma. And with that it was noticed that the husband and wife had stopped their arguing and were listening intently and avidly to what the monk was saying. The final little ingredient for our pot is that story about the samurai called Tadamasa, and he was a great samurai, but he was also a Zen practitioner and would often go to the temple where Tanzai was the abbot. But it so happened that there was a civil war going on in their country and he was sent to war. But one day after a very bloody battle, Tadamasa came in his armor with his wounds and he went to the temple just as Tanzai was giving a tea ceremony. And when he entered, Tanzai gave him a cup of tea and said to him, "How does it stand with you?" And with that, Tadamasa dropped the teacup and stomped on it with his heels and said, "Heaven and earth are completely broken." So Tanzai said, "And when heaven and earth are completely broken, how does it stand with you?" And he put his arms across his chest and bent low in front of Tanzai. And at that moment, Tanzai gave him a good whack. And Tadamasa recoiled in pain from his wounds. Tanzai said, "Heaven and earth are not completely broken." At that moment, the sound of a drum was heard in the distance. So Tadamasa immediately got up and went out to return to the battlefield. After the battle was over, he returned to the temple, now with gaping wounds, blood pouring out from them. When he entered and stood before Tanzai, Tanzai said, "How does it stand with you when heaven and earth are completely shattered?" And with that, Tadamasa leant on his sword and died. It's not often that there is an interpretation made of these stories, but perhaps it can just be suggested to us that all of us have been a Mola Nasruddin, had that stubbornness. We might have called it intrepidness, perhaps, but in another word, it's stubbornness. We've also been a husband and wife arguing between our head and our heart, if we can interpret the representations of what they mean from this story as being that. And perhaps we've even been like the samurai with his Zen tendencies and shattered the difference, the separation between the inward and the outward. But the question that arises is, have we yet leant on our sword? And what does this mean for us? What does it mean when we come to the place where we can no longer find a difference between the inward and the outward, like a stick on the ocean, perhaps. What does it mean to lean on our sword? If we've done so, there's no need to question it. But if we do need to question it, what does it mean for us?